So, estimate about how much money would the components cost, materials?
Well, just to start out to play with it, probably figure about $150. You've got to cut the stainless steel plates. I have some. If somebody wants to, I have a whole bunch of them of the 6x6 squares. If somebody wants to buy some, I just have just the money into the shearing of it. But if you guys want to just buy stainless steel plates and shear them off, that's whatever. If you've got a machine shop local that can do that, that works pretty well.
Back in my Joe Cell days, when I was really focused on that, there was quite a bit of talk about when you cut the metal that you get some magnetization of the metal going on. Do you have to be careful about that kind of stuff?
Using a conventional Joe cell, which has the concentric stainless steel tubes, you do have to worry about that. That's actually fairly easy to overcome with Brown's gas, because you can heat it and take out the magnetism. Shearing it or cutting the shapes out with a water jet is because I use flat parallel plates instead of the concentric stainless steel tubes, because I can control the distances much better. So when you shear them, there's less of an issue with that. Plus, there's magnetism, there's paramagnetism, and then there's diamagnetism. And so a couple of the free energy devices that I've seen actually relies upon a ratio between the three levels of magnetism, both paramagnetism, diamagnetism, and magnetism in varying ratios. And when they were able to tune the machines to not just the components, but everything around the machine to the ratios of more paramagnetism than the others, but different ratios, they were able to achieve free energy. So some amount of magnetism is good. I haven't actually run into an issue where the magnetism in the system is a detriment right now, because I don't work with the conventional or the concentric stainless steel tubes. So. And
the concentric tubes are usually what you see in a Joe cell. So a Joe cell is not necessary for this. It's one of the things where it shows up, but it's not necessarily a crucial component.
Let me back up here. The conventional Joe cell that we see, which is the conventional or the concentric stainless steel tubes, is one type of Joe cell. If you look at the books that have been written on Joe cell technology, and I actually gave a lecture on this about 5 years ago, if you look at the books and the information on that, what you're really looking for is certain types of materials interacting with other types of materials. So you're looking for metallic, and this also goes back to orgone research. You're looking for metallic versus natural materials. Some Joe cells, I have a battery. It literally looks like a battery. It's made out of brass plates and a different type of fluid in there, and it conforms to all the rules of a Joe cell. It's just not made out of a concentric tube or like the Mojo cell, a sphere, which is really fun to play with. But it actually conforms to all the rules of the Joe cell. Certain ratios to height, to width, and the fluid in there versus the metal that it's interacting with. So there are different types of Joe cells. The concentric tube is only one of them. So.
Is this going to be a science where you can follow a recipe like, for example, if you were to mass produce something like this, you can make it the same way every time and it works the same way every time? Or is there something that goes into the materials where you require a gift to do some tuning, an alchemical gift, for example?
I haven't run into that, actually. In this aspect, it's behaving the same way each time. And I'm not running into, times of day. I'm not running into the attitude of the operator, which I have machines that are that work absolutely contingent on the attitude and the spiritual mindset of the operator. But this is behaving in a little bit different way, and I think it's a refinement of the process that allows us to focus the energy without worrying too much about the outside extraneous input. Now, I can't rule out the zodiacal signs or where the moon is, which is actually very important.
In some processes.
In some process, it's important in a lot of scientific processes. They cannot machine the plutonium cores for nuclear bombs or nuclear reactors. They cannot machine them under certain signs of the moon, because if they do, the metal will literally change dimensions as the moon shifts. They have to machine them under certain signs that are what they call fixed. Otherwise, the metal will change dimensions and not work properly.
And this is talked about in people who are in that industry.
It is a little known fact in the industry. Yes.
Something they don't dare talk about to most people,
because it kind of flies in the face of conventional physics. So that's a very strange and very little known secret of the nuclear industry.
I understand people who make automobile parts, or like engines, for example, for race cars, that when they can make 3 engines under seemingly identical circumstances, but they have to test each one of them because they don't actually function the same.
That's amazing.
And it has to do with when they were made, and there's really no such thing as 2 identical scientifically made things, because there are other phenomena going on. It's not just humans that are responsive to astrological types of influences, that materials also have an input. But you're saying
I believe that absolutely.
In this particular process, you haven't noticed yet that kind of influence.
Well, I haven't noticed that yet on a macrocosmic scale. That may be happening on a microcosmic scale, but I haven't noticed it on a macrocosmic scale. You know, it's funny you mentioned that, because when I was in studying electrical engineering, they told us the same thing about things like solar panels and integrated circuits, and they actually have to put in, they actually have to engineer in adjustments so that they can tune something into the behavior pattern that they want. And from a religious perspective, we see that all energy has consciousness. And if we're working with certain types of energy, we have to understand that the consciousness of that energy is going to come into play. But on a macrocosmic scale, with this hydrogen system that I've been working with, and we're not seeing a lot of influence in that regard, which makes me happy, because it means that everybody can work with it and everybody can play with it. So that's exciting.
So it may not be necessary that the person have an alchemical calling, so to speak, to do this. Or do you think, how important do you think that would be?
Well, you know, we're going to find out in the next 6 months, because I'm very much alchemically oriented, and so I'm probably not the norm of the people that are going to be working with this. I learned something very interesting. Conventional engineering deals with the bell curve. Okay, they want to know what goes on in this normal space. Okay, and they plot all their diagrams and everything, and they create bell curves because they want to understand what goes on in this normal space. And I realized that is so far outside of my keen of understanding, because I don't care what goes on there, because that's normal. I want to know why this little spike occurred over here. I want to know what goes on outside of the norm. So that's funny, a funny way to look at it, but that's where I'm at.
And turn that into a new norm. Hone in on that.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So we didn't finish the question about what would be involved in getting started in this, just on a replication basis to prove to yourself that it works. We talked about materials. What about time?
Well, if you're mechanically or if you're hands-on oriented, about a week to put this all together.
A week full-time or tinkering time?
A week tinkering time, yeah.
Hobby time in the evening when you come home from work?
Yeah, exactly. Hobby time and just playing around with it. You can sit and put together the plates pretty easily. There are certain rules you have to follow, and so you don't say this is the this is the thing about working with hydrogen. You follow the rules until you understand the rules and you learn where you can break them. Okay, but when you first start out, you reproduce things exactly the way they were made before. Mm-hmm. Once you understand the rules, then you can start experimenting outside of the rules.
Do you have on your website some kind of a set of plans to...
No, nothing's, I just have a few pictures up there right now.
Mm-hmm.
I literally just barely got control of that website again from the person that was running it before. So, real good guy, but he kind of disappeared down in Mexico and is exploring the ancient ruins down there, which makes it very difficult to, run a computer and upstate websites. Yeah. So I just got control of that so I can start changing the content again.
Okay. And do you want to give your contact information, or can people go to the website to get that?
People can go to the website. The easiest way to contact me is either through Facebook or my email, earthsransom@yahoo.com. That's earthsransom@yahoo.com. Or just look me up on Facebook, and I communicate that way pretty easily too.
Okay.
So those are the easiest ways.
Yeah, I'm tempted to bring up what you posted on Facebook the other day about a 6-foot rattlesnake.
Oh. Well, I have been blessed with different messengers through my life, and I was attacked by a 6-foot rattlesnake the other day. That was a pretty interesting experience. It struck at me twice and missed both times, so it's a beautiful little miracle that I'm here, and but that was a sign of change, and actually, in retrospect, that was an interesting little warning that I received. So I'm glad that it happened. I did have to kill the rattlesnake, but because it was very aggressive and was not just hanging out by himself and doing nothing, he was actually very aggressive. So it was an indicator that certain things were changing for me. So, which happens. The last time was a bear, 5 years ago, broke into my house, teaching me an interesting lesson that I had to learn. So.
Interesting. Well, thanks for sharing that. Is there anything else in this particular sector that we haven't talked about that ought to be brought up?
I'm sure there is, but as when we start looking at the machine and such, I'll start thinking of more stuff that needs to be presented. But yeah.
All right. So let's do that as part 3.
Okay.
And we'll stop this segment for now.
All right. Sounds good. Plates instead of the concentric stainless steel tubes, because I can control the distances much better. So when you shear them, there's less of an issue with that. Plus, there's magnetism, there's paramagnetism, and then there's diamagnetism.
So, estimate about how much money would the components cost, materials?
Well, just to start out to play with it, probably figure about $100, $150. You've got to cut the stainless steel plates. I have some. If somebody wants to, I have a whole bunch of them of the 6x6 squares. If somebody wants to buy some, I just have just the money into the shearing of it. But if you guys want to just buy stainless steel plates and shear them off, that's whatever. If you've got a machine shop local that can do that, that works pretty well.
Back in my Joe Cell days, when I was really focused on that, there was quite a bit of talk about when you cut the metal that you get some magnetization of the metal going on. Do you have to be careful about that kind of stuff?
Using a conventional Joe cell, which has the concentric stainless steel tubes, you do have to worry about that. That's actually fairly easy to overcome with Brown's gas, because you can heat it and take out the magnetism. Shearing it or cutting the shapes out with a water jet is because I use flat